here, and hopefully this works, and here. So you heard that, I heard that, and
Can you? So I hear you on stream.
okay, you hear me on stream, and hopefully you should hear you now.
Yep, I hear me.
It works. The magic of technology.
Yes.
One of these days, a show will go off without a hitch. I swear.
Who is it? There's the there's a band that I love, Jimmy Eat World. Like
Yeah.
a emo. Okay, all right,
The
cool.
middle.
Yeah. I've seen them live so many times.
Recording
and
in
that's
progress.
That's actually how they start their shows. Is there's going to be a mistake. Something will happen. And without a doubt, I think every show that I've gone to, somebody's guitar string breaks, one of the amps don't work. There's always something. It's hysterical. So we
That's
are Jimmy
called
Eat World.
managing expectations. That's managing expectations. That's you set the bar low, and it's tough to trip over it. That's
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So might as well start off with my nice little spiel so everyone kind of knows what we're going to be doing. So firstly, the information presented in this discussion is of a general nature and is intended for educational and entertainment purposes. While many of the people here have various forms of mental health training, they are not your mental health professional. This discussion is not a replacement for mental or physical care or for the diagnosis of any mental health illness or condition. So, hello, and thank you for joining us once again for A Healer's Journey. Our new show within the Guardians MH podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Dr. Goku, and with me tonight is my co-host, Matt. So, how are you doing tonight, Matt?
I'm okay. I know I missed. Oh no, I was on for the last episode. It was the second episode that I missed.
You weren't here with Dr. Gameology.
Yes, I was not here for Dr. Gameology, but I was here for Dr. Scarlet. No, I'm doing all right. How about you?
Busy, but doing okay as well.
Yeah.
So if you're all joining us for the first time, Guardians MH is a 501c3 nonprofit focused on promoting mental health awareness throughout the gaming community. We strive to be a first step in assisting individuals with gathering meaningful resources in a safe and inclusive atmosphere. A healer's journey is just another way to normalize talking about mental health with other mental health professionals, discussing their journey in becoming a mental health professional and their unique abilities to help clients through their most challenging times. So tonight, please welcome our guest, Matt Fallows. So a little bit of confusion with two Matts, but we're going to get through it. So Matt, how are you doing tonight? And thank you so much for joining.
I am so thrilled to be here. It's an absolute honor. Love what you guys do. I'm doing pretty well tonight. It's been kind of a rainy, miserable day for most of the day, but try to enjoy what I can out of it. And really, that's about it. Just trying to keep your head down, going one day at a time. Isn't that right?
Oh, I'm happy to hear. We're heading for some rain in the next couple days, so hopefully we don't get pummeled. I think last weekend, I'm on Atlantic coast, as many people know, but Ontario got pummeled by a storm, and it was like a tornado warning, and it uprooted trees. And I sent Matt and Joe, our president, a TikTok of our Cobra chickens. So for people that aren't Canadian, Cobra chickens are Canadian geese. And they are not afraid of anything. While everyone was running away to go into stores, hunkering down, this Cobra chicken just sat down in the middle of the road and said, "Bring it." And made everyone just feel horrible of running from the storm.
So I know I've mentioned this show to you, but you need to watch Letterkenny because
I know.
And there is a full-blown episode on Canadian geese rather.
Yeah. Cobra chickens.
I think you would Cobra chickens. That sounds like that's the next indie comic book right there called Cobra Chickens. Just that's like that should be the next Canadian version of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Oh yeah, those things are vicious.
Irradiated Cobra chickens.
If you've never been bit
Cobra
by or
chickens.
chased by a Canadian goose,
Yeah. Oh yes,
they hurt.
they're mean.
So-
They won't back up.
Oh,
from
they
anything.
are. Generally,
New York
Canadians are
has-
nice, but they're mean.
New York has turkeys, at least in one of the boroughs I lived in, and Jersey has deer. So the worst I got.
So, for the people that might not know who you are, Matt, please tell us a little about who you are and what you do.
Well, like I said, my name is Matt Fellows. I am a practicing forensic therapist that works with the Department of Human Services in the state I live in, which is Minnesota. And with that, I work with individuals who have been civilly committed for specific types of offenses, sexual offenses. And other than that, I spend a lot of my time kind of thinking about how geek culture and kind of nerd culture can lend itself to therapy in a way that it seems like there's a gap in how we can kind of present therapy to people who might not otherwise be exposed to it. And I love this idea of using pop culture, using geek or geek cultural moments and characters to bring those together. Other than that, I love being outdoors. I fish a lot. I like playing video games a whole bunch. Yeah, that's really about it. I thought I'd have a cooler, a slicker script coming off the top, but that's what I'm working with right now.
I don't
But
know. That
working
was
in
very cool to
forensics
me.
is a really interesting field. So I did a rotation for 8 months at one of the local prisons down here, and my wife works in corrections, so she's a psychologist at the psychiatric hospital at the prison here, and
sure.
it is a fascinating field. So how did you get into working in forensics?
It's actually it is the thing that kicked off my interest in psychology at all. A very brief story. When I was in like 6th or 7th grade, my father, who's an attorney or worked as an attorney, had take your child to work day, and so he was the prosecuting attorney for a city and misdemeanor crimes. So I was allowed to join him for work and sit in the courtroom, and it was one of the most boring things I've ever done. Just sitting in a courtroom, listening to people dispute traffic claims for most of the day, until one guy came in that was unlike anyone else. He was absolutely losing it. He accused my dad and the judge of conspiring against him to steal his home and steal his money. He became aggressive and he had to be carried out. And that memory is seared into my mind, because I'd never seen anything like that. So I remember asking my dad later, what was that? What just happened there? He said, well, he's not mentally well. And he acted in a way that he thought was going to get him what he needed. And that was before I ever knew the term psychology. And so I just stuck with this idea. And frankly, it was probably started off more of a morbid curiosity than anything. And it carried me into this idea of when people do the things that we don't understand, and nobody really has a good idea of what does that mean? There must be someone trying to figure this out. And so even by the time I hit high school and I could start taking those psych classes, intro to psych and whatnot, I was immediately drawn to what I would later learn as kind of abnormal psychology, forensic psychology, where you see those behaviors and those outward and inward thinking patterns that just do not click, do not even make sense to the rest of us. And I just desperately wanted to know more. And so that's really what kicked me off down that, was this fascination with poorly understood behaviors and mindsets.
Because a lot of people will have a misconceived notion of a lot of the offenders that are incarcerated, certainly the ones with mental health issues, as to how they function or how they're being perceived, but a lot of them have serious trauma and have had horrible lives. Doesn't mean that anyone that has a horrible childhood will automatically become an offender, but a lot of them, they never got out of that cycle, and some of these predispositions shifted their view of the world. And working in
Absolutely.
forensics, again, I only worked there for 8 months, and I really missed the field. But working with them and really getting those breakthroughs were some of the most satisfying moments in my career.
Absolutely. Uh, the role of trauma in this type of work, I mean, it's literally impossible to ignore. Um, I didn't go into this thinking I want to be a trauma therapist. You know, you're trained in it and you understand how it works and how it looks, but that was never my goal. But I would say 95%, 90% of the clients on my caseload right now have a proper diagnosis of trauma, um, and of PTSD, and the impact when you listen to some of their stories of just like sometimes you just have to sit back and think, boy, you never stood a chance, did you?
Yeah.
Like you never ever had the opportunity to be somewhere safe consistently. You
Mm-hmm.
never learned that, and so some of these adaptive behaviors that they came up with that later become antisocial, dangerous, or whatever, um, are so informed by this trauma that they just grew up with constantly. Trauma was the norm.
Yeah, and not even if they're not even capital T traumas, there can be lowercase t traumas where are
Yes.
what are called ACE, so adverse childhood experiences.
Oh, yes.
And the list just goes on and on and on. I remember a client that I had where the file was just really thick, where you would just see these reports of all of the incidences that had happened throughout his life. And like you said, you never stood a chance.
Absolutely.
I
Go
oh
ahead.
sorry.
Sorry.
No, no, just to kind of to piggyback on that a little bit, one of the things that I learned in my time, actually that was sort of it was a very popular theory that was taught when I was in grad school, was this the idea of epigenetics, right? Where it's the outside world has such a significant and biological response in regards to, I'm gonna butcher it because I am nowhere near like a doctor by any stretch, and when it comes to that. But basically, traumatic events can lead to an activation of a gene for mental health or mental illness, right? So, and it's not all, it's still a theory and it's still something that's being studied, but it is something that I've kind of held on to, like that does make sense,
Well,
right? If
trauma
there is this,
changes the brain structure of a
right,
child that grows up. It changes how big and small certain elements of the brain gets.
right. So it's this idea that, we're all born with the genetic component of mental illness. It's just, is there something in the environment that activates it in a sense,
Mm.
right? And trauma plays a significant role in that. Something that I've used actually to when working with individuals who suffer from substance abuse and addictions, so kind of as that, because sometimes I used to get a lot of people who were very scientific focused. I'm like, great, boy, do I have an avenue for you. Let's talk. And it was this nice sort of biological lean in a sense. But yeah, no, that's something that I've kind of held on to in a sense that I think helps to understand sort of the cause or why things might happen in a sense, or that connection between trauma and things that occur, unfortunately, because of it.
And working in forensics, because like I mentioned before our show, I've pretty much listened to all of the trainings that you've done with Geek Therapeutics revolving Marvel and integrating these characters into treatment. So how has this helped or changed your relationship with a lot of the clients and patients that you have?
So that is such an interesting question. So first of all, thank you. I loved doing those geek therapy presentations. I think I probably did a dozen of them, 13 of them, something like that. And for those of you listening or watching that haven't seen them, it's just essentially roughly an hour-long presentation about a single character or group of similar characters that represent certain aspects of mental health. In my line of work, a lot of the treatment programming that we have that the clients I work with go through is pretty set. You have the ability to improv, of course, in any therapy session, in a group therapy session. You have the ability to do that, but my ability to have like a geek therapy group is somewhat limited. So these are typically when I integrate this stuff into my work, it's usually with the clients who have already shown a typically a very strong predisposition or enjoyment to geek stuff. So these are guys that have been locked up in this facility for quite some time, and their favorite things are getting the new Marvel movie in when they're able to order that in, or getting comic books in. Like, they get to see that stuff, and so they connect with some of those storylines stronger than just about anything else, because it's just what they spend their time doing. So an example of this is I have several clients that have difficulty controlling their behaviors when they have really strong emotions, anger being a big one, right? Somebody loses their temper, they feel disrespected, they feel like somebody's trying to cheat them out of something, and they lose it.
They explode.
They do very, very quick ramp up. And so I saw a client that was struggling with that and also loved Marvel movies. Always loves to chat me up about Marvel movies. So we started talking about the Hulk. And it's a pretty easy one-to-one transition to talk about anger management skills and the character of Bruce Banner losing it and turning into the Hulk. And so by using that, we were able to set a foundation. I understand this character, you understand this character. We both understand what this character's behaviors look like. Let's start there. Because this client also is very oppositional to treatment, just because of the nature of what they've been through in the past, some of the trauma that they've experienced in other treatment centers in years prior. So using that all together to set the ground floor, say, hey, we're just talking about the Hulk right now. You can put down your defenses a little bit, and then we build that rapport with one another and can move on from there. I wish I had the opportunity to use some of these more often, but I am starting to see more and more opportunities as I've been working with more of these guys.
Because it builds their understanding of things by distancing themselves from the situation. They're not necessarily talking about them, but they're kind of looking at their issues or the situations through the lens of this specific character. So today I was talking with a client essentially about the Hulk as well, and like I mentioned about Rocket, with her sons. So she has two sons, and they both have severe anger issues. And I talked to them or her about the Hulk and anger. I made the reference between anger and rage. So anger is a spark. Anger can be a tool and can be beneficial. It can motivate you to move forward. But rage is a uncontrolled wildfire that destroys things in its path. So Hulk in Avengers is that anger. He's pointed at the target and go.
Yes.
But in Age of Ultron, when Wanda takes over, that anger becomes rage. And there's this moment, that scene where Tony calls down the Hulkbuster and he has that go to sleep, go to sleep, go to sleep moment. Because he couldn't contain the rage.
Great.
Yeah.
It's a great scene.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is something, and the Hulk's journey throughout the MCU in and of itself is extraordinarily interesting, because it is a different character in every movie. Every movie he's in, he has made progress in some way. There's an extra aspect to his personality, the integration between Banner's intelligence and the Hulk's strength starts to blend a little bit. You see it in Thor Ragnarok, full sentences, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, because he went from a toddler to like a like a school age preteen
Yes.
to Professor Hulk being like a young adult.
Yes. Absolutely. And we
Childhood
see his
development at its
growth.
finest.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can actually take those moments of growth because they identify in the movies, this is why he got better in this way, right? So you go from Avengers to Age of Ultron, and what's Hulk's new thing? Well, he can calm down. He can calm down with the help of Natasha, right? Sun's getting real low, buddy. He didn't have that before. So all of a sudden we see that the Hulk, Bruce Banner, has set up an external support system. He's relying on people when he can't rely on himself. Step one, all right? So he's got that. The next movie, he's able to calm himself down a little bit, or he's able to walk away from a situation where he's going to hurt someone. Where in the Avengers movie, he just about killed Natasha and everyone else. So that's that gradual growth that you notice when you look for it, is just really good.
And I think these stories, and we've talked to other professionals, that stories matter. And it's a big form of human communication that we can relate with stories. And I think it's not something that is talked about enough during school. Certainly during undergrad or even grad school, I needed to learn all of these things outside of school. I had this interest and I had this outside of the box thinking where I brought this idea to my clinical supervisor or my research supervisor of my thesis, which is parasocial relationships and prosocial behaviors. And when I gave him the elevator pitch, it was a lot of people think, what would Jesus do? What would Spider-Man do? And
I like that.
luckily enough, he was on board. But not enough is talked about the power of story. And I think that is something that is lacking within this. When it comes to your journey, tell us about your journey into becoming a mental health professional.
Oh boy. Well, I was, like I said, it kind of started off with that whole event, just kind of witnessing mental illness, kind of unfiltered, and really sparking that curiosity, frankly. Um, from there, I kind of dove feet first into psychology, straight into into undergrad, which, like, looking back on it now, was just a stroke of luck more than anything. I mean, how many psych majors dropped their major later, or how many therapists now did not start as a psych major? But I had initially started in thinking, yes, I'm going to do a psych major and I'm going to do a music major because I played trombone at the time. And I was like, yeah, music therapy. Everyone who walks into a therapist's office wants to hear a trombone. Um, but like I ended up, going into undergrad relatively clueless, just about psychology in general, almost nothing about mental health. And as I went through it, I really, really stuck to the ideas that I was learning about in abnormal psychology, in forensic psychology. We even had, and this was at North Dakota State University, we had a psychology and film course where we
Oh, that must have
watched
been really interesting.
It was fascinating. It even started, this guy, like, I can't for the life of me remember his name. I feel bad for that. But we started off with like the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari or something, which is a movie from like the 30s or the 20s or something like that. And it focuses on like mesmerism, and then it goes through all this other stuff.
Okay.
But I kind of started off my journey without even thinking about it, integrating, culture and mental health. From there, I kind of dabbled in a lot of different things. I tried. North Dakota State University is kind of well known for, of their psychology department, perception. I worked doing a lot of help with grad students on eye tracking experiments. We had this huge car driving simulator that would track your eyes and was tucked away in some room in the psych building that I ended up learning how to code and run for some of the grad students. But from beyond that, I actually never thought of myself as a therapist proper. That was never my goal, was to sit down with somebody and listen to them talk. And I definitely didn't want to work with anyone with serious mental illness, right? Because you hear about schizophrenia and you go, whoa, I don't want to mess with that.
Mm.
And
Oh no.
yeah, oh no, God, what could happen to me, right?
Yeah, the depiction of these bigger mental illnesses scares
Yes.
people. And
Yeah.
Oh
oftentimes
yeah.
they're not really well depicted.
No, not at all. And the education I got was good from a textbook standpoint, right? It tells me what it is, what some of the symptoms are, but when you haven't met someone like that and you picture it in your mind, even getting a college education with it, you think someone out of control. You think
Mhm.
someone who is not tethered to this reality, and that's just simply not true at all. Um,
There are
and
people
so
that struggle, that suffer.
Oh, absolutely. My first job in mental health out of grad school was working community mental health in rural Minnesota. Um, and these are this is the sort of facility that is a first stop for someone who's just had a serious mental illness crisis and cannot be held in a jail. So I instantly became very familiar with what schizophrenia looks like, what
Mm-hmm.
schizoaffective disorder looks like, what you know what somebody with bipolar disorder and meth addiction looks like, and managing those behaviors in that way.
Because a lot of them,
My grad,
they're
yeah,
self-medicating.
yes, that was a huge
Uh-huh.
thing. They would self medicate and they would be extraordinarily productive for a period of time.
Mm-hmm.
Based on what I saw, most folks handled meth pretty well for about a year and a half, maybe even 2 years, before things started to fall down around them. But especially those that are medicating symptoms, um,
Right.
and unfortunately exacerbating many of them. But it is a sense of control, and it is a sense of peace and calm sometimes, depending what they're using, that can provide them.
Yeah, and that's where also too on that point, where because I believe at one point in unfortunately within the system there was this division of substance abuse and mental health, right? There was
Yeah.
no, I'm only treating your using of meth. I'm not going to treat your schizophrenia. But wait a minute, the reason you're using meth is because you're using it to ground yourself back into reality realistically, which of course sounds crazy, but it's the truth in that matter, right? Because somebody is using that. And to even bring that back a little bit to a little bit of a lower level, right? Those, you see it a lot with like teenagers, especially young, like 12, 13, who are chronically using marijuana. It's like, that's because because potentially there's an undiagnosed ADHD, there's an undiagnosed
Yeah.
anxiety disorder,
Or
and so this
depression,
is
there's multiple
right.
things.
So there's
Yes.
potentially this chronic usage of that because they're coping with it. Is it a good coping skill? No. But at the
But
age
it's
of 12 and
coping.
13, but it's coping, right? So this whole idea of treating one and not the other, frankly, is bull at this point
Yes.
because you need to treat both because that's where A is happening because B is there and B is still happening because A is there. Got to treat both.
Yeah, and a lot of
And
people,
it was
when
hard
they
to tell people that,
yeah,
unfortunately.
because when they see or hear about someone that has like schizophrenia, which is one we can kind of categorize them as some of the bigger mental health disorders,
Sure.
they don't understand how someone really suffers and what they really go through because people can kind of understand anxiety or depression,
Mhm.
but voice hearing
Mm.
and change in reality perception, unless you've had a really bad trip or you suffer from schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder, you've never experienced that. And I think this is where either movies or video games play such a large part. In my mind, I'm thinking Hellblade, Senua's
I was just
Sacrifice,
gonna say, yeah.
having this impeccable depiction of schizophrenia
Mhm.
and voice hearing and the attention to detail that the developers put into this to give this real depiction is incredible but also very haunting. So I don't know if you've played that game, Matt.
I actually haven't. I was just going to ask you about this because I'm always looking for representation like that in media I consume. You said it's called Hellblade?
Yeah, so Hellblade, it came out a few years ago.
On Game
By
Pass, if you have Game Pass.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
I
I might
believe
be
it
able to
Ninja
check
Theory,
that out.
they got bought by Microsoft a while back, and the new
Yeah.
one's coming out pretty soon, I think, as well. So essentially, the game focuses on Senua, which is Celtic, I do believe, like within like Norse mythology,
Yeah.
and goes or has like a psychotic break because of the death of her husband, and goes on a journey to hell to fight Hela. But she
Interesting.
is having this psychotic break where she's hearing voices, and these voices are helping guide you through the world, and you're using visual and auditory hallucinations to solve puzzles. But the way they
Interesting.
recorded
Yeah.
the audio is you have to play it with headphones because it's eerie the way that they recorded it, because you really feel the voices kind of coming inside your mind but going around you, and it is incredible.
Really? So this
And
is the sort of game you'd really want to play with headphones
Oh
on.
yeah.
yeah. And I believe
That
they
sounds
worked with
fascinating.
actual hi Amanda. They
Yeah.
worked with actual psychiatrists,
Yeah. So
psychologists, and
Dr.
like
Paul
to
Fletcher
get
was
right.
the psychiatric lead on it, and they also worked with actual voice hearers, so people that
Wow.
do hear voices, and to make sure that it was recorded properly. They developed a new recording style, so binary audio, where you have a
Yeah.
mic and you have like two 3D printed ears on it to filter in the sound.
That's so cool. I will absolutely check that out. That sounds like an excellent game.
It is, and it's not very long. It's 5-ish hours or so, five
Oh,
seven
okay.
hours, but it is really good.
Yeah, that sounds excellent. That sounds really excellent.
When it comes to these depictions, again, we talked about how it's not something that's talked too much in like undergrad or grad school. I know my schooling was pretty bland in terms of here are some of the textbooks, here are some of the research, and have at it. For you, how was undergrad and grad school, and how it shaped your perception on psychology?
So yeah, so undergrad put me in a very clinical mindset because that's a lot of what was happening at that school. They kind of, I think they got a lot of their funding for their programs through, like I said, perception, visual, that sort of stuff. And so by the time I was looking at grad schools, I was thinking very clinically minded. I had this idea in my head that I'm going to be a clinical psychologist and I'm going to enjoy assessing people and making these making these big long reports and understanding more about human behavior. And then I get to grad school, and I started my grad school at the Chicago School of Professional Psychology, and I later transferred to the University of St. Thomas in Minneapolis. Um, but while I was in uh, when I was in Chicago, I actually had a professor named Dr. Patrick O'Connor, um, who you may be familiar with, but he introduced me to this idea of using comic books, using movies in a therapeutic setting. And when I talked with him, I also had the opportunity to join him and a few other people in my cohort going to the San Diego Comic Con. And that was my first proper experience at the interaction between professional level psychology and the practice and the biggest group of nerds on the planet. And it was beautiful. It was so cool. Everyone just vibed with this idea of, that's when I first heard about, Travis Langley, Dr. Langley,
Mm.
and all of a sudden the psychology of Batman. It's like, what? You're writing books about this sort of stuff? And like, like people are digging it, and there's some important messages that you can pull from it, and the importance of cosplay and representation and all this different stuff. And I fell in love with it, because frankly, grad school was starting to get kind of dry. I was realizing that assessment, that even the doctorate was not as appealing as it once was, and that all of a sudden there's this niche, a growing niche of people that are seeing the power of stories, like you had said, and using these stories to help nerds who desperately need that sort of helps in some cases. I don't know about y'all, but I definitely had some lonesome time as a kid where I connected enormously with the comics, with the books, with the movies at my disposal at the time. And so as soon as I recognized that integrating culture into scientifically backed, properly verified
Evidence-based
methods
treatments.
Thank you, evidence-based. It opened a whole new set of doors for me, and I kind of shifted from that clinical mindset to more of a counseling mindset. This idea of, I like how this might be applied, and that's when I ended up shifting over to University of St. Thomas, or St. Thomas University in Minneapolis, and pursuing the counseling degree at that point.
Because I've talked about this in the past, where even now, with how popular stories and nerd culture has become, a lot of therapists still don't utilize it and still see it as very niche and fringe, and that it has kind of almost like no place. It's kind of looked down upon. And I remember doing my residency, or even before that, my internship, and talking to my clinical supervisor then, saying, oh, look, I want to do this with this client. And them just kind of scoffing at me, saying, really? No, you're not going to do that. Here's the CBT manual. You will do this on page so-and-so, because
you will follow step by step DBT, and
I
you
will do
like it.
This in my style with this, and the client's going to dig it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of, again, frowned upon until I was able to get the results.
It's the idea of how you use those tools, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's funny. I had this conversation with a friend of mine. Like, school was great. I enjoyed grad school for the clinical sort of like experience and the knowledge. It was great. I didn't learn anything until I left and started doing it for myself, though. I'm going to be very blunt and very honest.
Oh, love that.
Because not that I wasn't prepared, but like there is a level in this field, I feel like, where you do need to learn on the job. Clinical experience is 100% necessary, because that's when you get to take those skills. And this is also where it's kind of like a little bit of an art form too. You get to take everything that you've been taught, you get to bring it to the person in front of you, but you are the one that's bringing it to them. So you get to do, what is it in CBT? You get to do the downward arrow technique, but kind of how you want to do it, right? And how, as long as it's still following that general practice, you can still work with the person in front of you how they need that technique, though, at that moment, right? Because not everything works for everyone. And like you mentioned before, Matt, just really quick, sorry.
That's okay.
Sometimes we have to use certain things to get through to somebody, right? You use the Hulk to get through to a very, somebody who just like, I don't want to talk to you. I don't like this, resistant to treatment. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yep.
Right. So we need that little edge, I think. And that takes twofold. One, that takes knowledge of various things that go on in the world, and that includes the culture of gaming and movies and pop culture and things like that. But also, two, knowing the person that's in front of us, because that person was not in my textbook, never will be. So I got to get to know them first before I can adapt and utilize the things that I have learned on a educational level into a more practical level.
And what I was going to say is, I remember one of my classes in grad school was intercultural psychology, the importance of culture and how different cultures respond to different forms of therapy and approaches, where the therapist needs to be versed in culture. You don't need to know everything about the culture, but you need to know at least these specifics or when to refer. So, how Native American is different than Eastern European, or how Latino or how African American are very different in terms of certain approaches versus Asian American. All these nuances. But geek and nerd culture is culture. For them, it speaks and they are versed in it. Why not use it? Why not apply it?
Completely agree with what both of you said. And one of the cool things about geek culture, nerd culture, is that it is a type of culture that is ubiquitous. Anyone, any person from any background can be in this particular type of culture. So when you find somebody that needs that type of help, or that wants to have a discussion maybe about mental health, but they're not ready for that yet, but they are ready to talk about how awesome Captain America is, or how cool it was when Iron Man did all those sweet fighting moves against Bucky or something. When you have that platform and you can bridge that gap in a way that they can sometimes help you step into conversations you wouldn't otherwise have, and some of that competency, as if you kind of want to call it that geek cultural competency, is has been more valuable in my practice than I ever expected it would be going into it. I mean, at most I thought, yeah, we can chat about this sort of stuff in the first 5 minutes or something, break the ice a little bit, relieve some tension, talk about something we both enjoy. But no, and when there is something as important to someone as a goals or morality defining book, or a character that they identify with more than other people who exist or are in their life, you have a proper inroad to start having bigger discussions that they might not otherwise have.
And certainly that so many therapists tend to, again, discount all those things or see them as wrong or things to be changed, whether it be like comics or anime or video games. They see them as problematic rather than something that you should lean into.
I'm actually dealing with that right now at the place that I work at. So this facility, lots of guys in this facility. It's structured somewhat like a prison, but it is technically a treatment center. But some of these guys just spend most of their day kicking back, doing whatever. They're not interested in treatment. But one thing that I have noticed is that there is one game that is extraordinarily popular, and that's Dungeons and Dragons. Um, I more than half of the clients on my caseload play, I would say, two different, like they'll have between 2 and 5 different games going at a time that they do weekly. So it takes up like a majority of their waking hours sometimes. And I had this idea that I want to say, like, these clients aren't engaging in treatment. They are resistant to treatment. They're resistant to, me, maybe it is, maybe they're resistant to the environment, but they love D&D. They love tabletop role-playing games, and I know that there are programs that you can take on to help you guide the players in that game as a DM in growing certain pro-social skills, in growing communication skills, and learning how to trust other people. And I just see this huge opportunity in our facility for re-engaging these guys in a way that they truly connect with. And I brought it to, a supervisor's supervisor, and was I mean, like the eye roll was spectacular. I mean, it was instantly brushed away as, no, I don't even want to hear about that right now. And so there's an opportunity, and I haven't stopped pestering people about it, but I very much relate to this idea of, people sometimes of an older generation, although that is not universal, will say like, these are games, these are toys, these are movies. We're here to do therapy, and miss that ability to integrate them.
We still kind of need to prove that it is viable yes. therapy.
Yeah,
but it's always the aspect of meeting the person where they are, though. That is yes. the core of. I mean, it's the core of the work that I do both now and that yes. I've done in the past. I cannot force, right, the person across from me to do anything, right? But I can meet them where they are. And in reality, if where they are is playing Dungeons and Dragons, well, shit, I'm going to get a freaking character. I'm going to get my DM screen and let's run a game, right? Because that's where they are. And if I could throw in the subtle therapeutic aspect of it, even if it's minimal, you're still doing a service and a justice to the people that are there, because they're already enjoying the game. Now they're just getting additional aspects out of it, right? And Dr. Megan Cannell from Geek Therapeutics does a whole course material on yes. using acceptance and commitment therapy and Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, that training was amazing.
I took it, and it was awesome because it's it's true, it's practical, and it's effective.
Absolutely.
So, I don't like your supervisor. No, I'm joking.
My supervisor's great. My supervisor has some more stuff to maybe
there's still those suits where they tend yeah. to like see therapy as these textbooks, these evidence-based treatment approaches where there's no like wiggle room. And I find that these wiggle room moments are the moments where I've had the greatest success, or that they have helped me become a better therapist. So you mentioned for you going to San Diego Comic-Con and having this experience. What are some of the other like formative moments that you had throughout your journey to where you are now?
Well, so San Diego Comic-Con was a huge one. Yeah, we touch upon that, but it's just, geek mecca. It's like nowhere else on Earth, and it is wonderful. Other things that kind of guided me in this way, I think one of them is just that experience that I briefly kind of alluded to it earlier, is that childhood experience of just kind of like dealing with whatever emotions you don't understand by diving into like media of some kind. And my go-to as a kid was Calvin and Hobbes. And so like I read those books back to front over and over and over again, and I started to find, there's deep messages in some of those comics, much deeper than I realized at the time. But I started finding comfort in some of the things that I would read, and some of the things that Calvin or Hobbes or Calvin's dad or whatever would say that just kind of stick with you. And the longer you carry those messages, the more you realize their staying power. And you may not realize until 15 years later that, hey, wow, that actually had a really big impact on me. So those two were big ones. One of the formative experiences, and I don't know exactly why it is, but when I think about some of my favorite times in college education, I think of undergrad when I was first learning abnormal psychology. And it might have just been all the planets aligning or whatever, but it was an earlier morning class where everyone was really chill. The professor was brilliant and really well spoken, and I found every single lesson calming and captivating, and I just absorbed everything about abnormal psychology that I could, and that really informed, I think, the direction I ended up taking. let's see, beyond that, I think that one of the biggest influences on my understanding of the power of stories and their use is through my love, my true genuine love of the Star Wars franchise.
Mm.
I am a colossal Star Wars fan, and I have been, I have just been following these characters forever and ever. I was 10 years old when the Phantom Menace came out, and there's nothing cooler than Darth Maul. And so I just wanted to know everything about these characters, and so I read these books, and I watched the TV show when it came out. And all of a sudden, these books and these TV shows start carrying a lot more meaning than cool lightsaber fights.
Mm-hmm.
They're talking about coming of age experiences. They're talking about uh, emotions that me as a man, have been told to not talk about. You don't talk about your sadness. You don't talk about your fear. You don't talk about your anger unless you're going to do something aggressive out of it, right? That aspect of some of that more toxic aspects of masculinity. And pulling from those stories, and then all of that happening at the same time that I'm going through grad school, and it's all happening when I'm getting involved at San Diego Comic-Con, and starting to branch out in life and finding the things that bring me joy. And it all just sort of kind of slowly wove itself together into what it is now, this general direction of, I want to help as many people as I can, and do so with a method of communicating treatment and communicating mental health that hasn't really been there in a major way. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm still very new on my journey as it speaks. You talked to me about this journey. I feel like it just started. Like, and I have plans and hopes and for the future of bringing this stuff into a professional or private practice setting.
Because I think a lot of this new cohort of therapists that are coming in that have grown up with these characters, these series. So on the day that we're recording this episode, so we're May 25th, this is today Star Wars' 45th anniversary.
Yes, it is.
Eight.
That's so good.
It's amazing.
And in 2 days, Kenobi's coming out. And I cannot wait.
Yes!
And I cannot wait. But you think of it, it's 45 years. Many of the people that we will see have grown up with Star Wars in one way, shape, or form. Whether they saw it in the theaters as an adult, as a teen, as a child, or grew up with the prequel trilogy or the sequel or a variation of. Again, whether it be Star Wars, Star Trek, or Marvel. I talked the other day where Marvel, not just the MCU, but Marvel Comics as a whole, holds a Guinness record for the largest fictional universe created by humans.
Wow, I didn't know that at all.
Because of
Amazing,
all of the
isn't it?
different stories, they're all part of the same universe. They're just branches of the multiverse.
That's incredible. Does that count, Marvel's acquisition of Star Wars, or is that outside of it?
I think that's outside of it, but it's like the main Marvel, 616 universe and all of the
Yeah.
various timelines is the single largest written universe that was created by man, which is incredible to me. And it does make sense as to how many stories and comics there are.
I love that idea of just like, we have to start talking about this because look how many people are consuming. Like, look how much we have to pull from. It's like sitting on this incredible resource and not using it. If we're not talking about it. I actually saw, it was a little while ago, but I can't remember who tweeted it out or said it. Might have been Microsoft, but they said, or it was YouTube, I think. They said that on some day recently, within the last year, YouTube videos of the game Minecraft had been viewed 1 trillion times. And that number, of course, goes up by likely millions every day. And it made me think, so 1 trillion views, like, even if that's only, 10 minutes per view, that's thousands of years. Thousands of years. Has any piece of media ever been interacted with more than Minecraft? And if so, or if it is something that almost everybody of a certain age or lower, realistically, understands, what can we use it for? I mean,
And
like,
Minecraft
just,
is incredibly complex. I talk about the
yeah,
person that built a computer, a working computer in Minecraft.
yeah, the
It
redstone
still
stuff.
boggles my mind.
It's
I
unbelievable.
don't even know how to play it. I'll watch the videos. I will. I'm one of
Yeah,
those people. I'll gladly sit there, watch somebody build something. I will gladly watch a Minecraft server. Um, it, but it is amazing, and I think again too, it just goes to show the power of these mediums. It's the
yeah,
power of content creation. It's the power of gaming. It is the power of just how many people can be captured through one idea, through one game. How many people follow, love, and are a part of that community. And I think, not to go completely left field, I want to keep it within the realm, but I think that's the one of the main reasons why, at least within Guardians, that like we were like, no, we want to capture and work with content creators, big, small, whatever, to give them the tools to give to their community, right? We're not asking, there's no reason for anybody to be a therapist who doesn't want to be a therapist. That's not what we're saying. But you have this, I don't want to use the word power, but you do have this sway on your community where you could provide them with something that they might need without interrupting your content creation, without interrupting your will, without interrupting your world. And I think that's also something that even we only have a very small but growing foothold in, but it's something I think it just needs to continue to grow and grow, because that's what gives people the tools or just the resources to be like, oh, hey, I can get help, right? And I got that
yeah,
from, because a friend of a friend is in this Discord server that has this bot, and then I threw it in my server, and I found it's just word of mouth. But now we want to use it for positive. We want to use it for good, in a sense.
yeah.
And I think that's another avenue of kind of what you're saying here, where it's just like it's an untapped market when it comes to positive mental health, right? We're not talking about it as businessmen looking to make, trillions of dollars. We're just saying, like, this is a area that can be used for so much good.
Absolutely.
And for me, some of the best moments in my very young career, by all standpoint, is being able to use geek therapy in one way, shape, or form in therapy to help a client see things differently or relate to something, and having them just click, say, "Oh, I never saw it this way." What are
I
some
had
of
a,
these
oh,
moments that you've experienced? Some of the best moments that you've experienced as a
I
mental health
got one.
professional?
I got one that just kind of came to me recently. Um, like I said, at the current facility I work at, my ability to integrate geek therapy is somewhat limited. I still can flavor pretty much whatever I want with it, but it's a little limited. But I have a client that struggles quite a bit with emotion regulation, partially due to a diagnosis, partially due to the lack of learning these skills when growing up. We talk about a traumatic environment. Um, but what this client was, one of the things that they were working on was self-awareness, right? Just being aware of the people around you, the impact that you have, the words that you're speaking. You're getting into fights. People are getting angry at you because you're doing and saying these things, and I'm not sure you're super aware of it. This also happens to be one of those clients that plays D&D most of the day. So we had a sit down during one of our sessions, and I said, "What do you know about perception checks?" And the client immediately starts rattling off, yeah, this is when you do this or this or that. And I said, "What would it look like for you to do a perception check in your real life?" So all of a sudden, like you're sitting in a situation, and all of a sudden you roll a perception check, and you just take a look around you. Who's around you? What level of voice are you using? What things are you saying? And kind of reflect on that. And the client still struggled with a lot of things and continues to, but every so often they'll come up to me and he'll say, like, "Hey, I just did a perception check and I decided I wasn't going to get involved in that argument," or "I did a perception check and I realized I was doing something that could be perceived as inappropriate." And that was one of those moments that, even though the client has a ways to go, it was like that clicked, and I know it for a fact.
And
was
he's
just
using it.
He's using it. We didn't even get to that part where I told him to practice it. We had just discussed the idea of it, and then he started using it on his own volition. And I found that very rewarding, actually, just because I'll be quite honest. In my line of work, you get very few clinical wins. I'll call it that. And so when you can find something that can push someone in a new direction, it is really, really rewarding. So that's one of those examples, um, where where just a discussion about kind of just a really vague, nerdy topic, perception checks and D&D,
Right.
turned into a practical behavioral change that helps this client function better among their peers.
You met them. You met them where they were at. You used
where he's at.
something that they know that they can attribute and that they could utilize. Just all around fantastic. And I love it. I love to hear these.
And
It
this
really
is what
do.
therapy needs to be. Because we see so many just dry textbooks for treatment. So how to apply CBT, how to apply DBT, and yeah, you can do it and you'll get some result. But 80% of success in therapy is the relationship you build with a client.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is where stories, geek therapy, and all of this nerd culture really comes into play.
Mm-hmm.
I think an aspect of this as well is when, especially in my line of work, when I talk about, the serious, significant trauma histories of my clients, it really, I really do mean it. So, like, these are individuals that have been civilly committed for sexual offenses, and I would say 95% of them, I think it's healthy to estimate, were sexually assaulted as children. Um, or at some point in their life have been the victim of sexual assault. And when I talk to them about their experiences growing up, one of the things you do not find very often is stability or safety. They don't always know the rules that they're playing by. Maybe one of their parents, has a substance abuse issue, and have unpredictable moods, or they're always getting in trouble at school, so they don't have a predictable place to go to. But what is always predictable 100% of the time is the movie that they like to watch, is the comic book that they like to read, because they understand the characters, they understand the rules of the world, and it is a safe place to be. It is safe. Nothing is ever going to traumatize them from the comic book because they understand what's going on. And so they imagine themselves as these characters because these characters are strong. They don't get hurt in that same way, and they build these identities, with these clients, and being able to recognize the safety that can come from connecting to a character like that is also an aspect that gets overlooked a little bit. Because quite frankly, when I sit down with a new client in my facility, I can probably count on the fact that someone who looks very much like me has been cruel to them at some point in their life. Some straight white dude with a big voice and a beard has called them something horrible or assaulted them or done something to them that has made them feel crazy unsafe. And so when we start talking about something that I know that they care about and that I care about, uh, we can meet in the middle from very, very, very far apart. Um, and that's new in in my approach to some of these guys. That's been that's it's still taking work to get there, but I'm making connections with some guys that haven't talked with a therapist in 10 years. Um, and that's a big, big deal for them. And it feels good to be able to do that.
And a big part of our work is being able to connect with these people, to connect with the client that is in front of us. And for some people, it can be really easy, and for some others, it can be really hard. But being able to connect and hear these stories and be part of their change, certainly when it comes into corrections and for in a forensic setting, and even general clinical settings, it changes us. It
Yes.
changes how we view the world. I know the way I view the world now is not the same of when I was in my early 20s starting undergrad. For you, how has the profession changed you, changed the way that you see the world?
Oh, that's a good question. This the as it when especially in corrections and even more specifically in the type of work that I do with the clients who have committed the type of crimes that they have, I find myself being very vigilant about my own feelings of jadedness, um, because I the things that I read in facts of finding reports or histories, and the things that I hear in individual or group sessions with these individuals, can be extraordinarily difficult to hear, and it is an it would be too easy to lose hope in people when you hear that day in and day out. And I struggled with that for a little while to the point where I found it very beneficial to get my own therapist to process this. Like you can process with a supervisor at work, and that's great. But I wanted an impartial person to discuss, to say, like, hey, I am feeling pretty negative, frankly, about the state of the world. And then, the news and just our lives over the past, frankly, 6 years, at least for me, has been stressful to say the least. Coming into adulthood as in terms of professionalism and truly going out on your own and having all this around you, and then you go to work and you're talking with people who are, you know, villainized for pretty good reason by the majority of people, and it's tough to find positivity in that. So for a while, I really struggled with staying positive and finding purpose in my work, which is kind of a bizarre thing to say as someone who's kind of supposed to have their shit together from the
Yeah,
outside, right?
yeah. Most mental health professionals and have their own issues that they're dealing with, and we're not invulnerable. We're
Right.
We
not
are
made of
human.
Teflon.
That's right. We are human, and that is that's something that I have to remind myself sometimes.
Me
Um,
as well.
yeah, and
Yeah.
so since then, since I've been talking with this therapist, and I've changed some things about frankly how I'm eating and like taking care of myself
Hmm.
just in general, um, but I've started to find I've had to adjust my perception a little bit to find the joy in the small victories, like I was talking about. Your perception checks, your little moments on the unit, or in the facility that I'm at. But ultimately, it is giving me a sense. When I think about my future, what I feel nothing but optimism weirdly enough, for everything that I'm kind of, working with right now and everything that's been going on, and tragedy after tragedy, blowing up our phones and seeing it every day, I still have this optimism that there is more I can add to this conversation. And I like that idea. I won't be in forensics forever, but I think the lessons I'm learning being there, working with probably one of the groups of most stigmatized people that I can think of, sex offenders. When you work with people that get no empathy from the outside world and struggle with incredibly complex diagnostic profiles, and they really are. It's the most complex. They're the most complex clients I've ever met in my life. Um, you start to build these strengths that you didn't think that you had. It kind of very much trial by fire. Matt, you had talked about like you can learn from the books, you can learn about this or that, but until you get practical experience, you really don't know shit because you are going to get knocked straight back on your butt the second you start talking to someone that catches you off guard, that insults you, that threatens you, that does something like that. And it's just about like the thing that they really need to teach is how to manage your own emotions in the moment with like breathing techniques or something like that. Um, but that's kind of my outlook right now, is that struggling with that trial by fire that every therapist goes through in one way or another, and then slowly finding your footing and building those strengths to move forward and make your own little mark on the field.
And the field that you're mentioning in forensics, it's a very tough field because of the population that you're working with, that they're very stigmatized by the general population. But unfortunately, within correctional staffing,
Yes.
one thing that happened to me, so I went from working in corrections, so I did part of my my practicums there, to working in private practice where I work on the other side, which is working with correctional officers that are on
Oh,
on leave. And so I kind of seen both sides, because the ones that I work with are the ones that cared, the ones that
right.
burnt out. And being treatment staff, we were called, and when I was working there and still now, con lovers, for
Yeah.
wanting to help these people that have done these horrendous crimes. But I didn't see the crime. I saw the person that was suffering. So you're wanting to help this person fight against everyone that has just never really given them a chance, and then fighting against the institutional staff that is not giving them a chance. And this creates this dynamic between security and treatment staff.
Yeah, it certainly can. One of the things I'm very thankful for is that on the particular unit I work with, our clinical team works very closely with the security staff that work that unit regularly, because our clients are have really special, unique, individualized needs. And so when I talk about multidisciplinary approach, which is an enormous part of the place that I work, yeah, you're absolutely right. If I notice that if you don't build those connections, or if those connections don't exist, everyone's work gets harder, a lot harder. When you have clinical staff doing one thing, and then maybe you have security staff that has nothing but disdain for
Mm-hmm.
these guys, and some of the things that they've done, and
Why would
it's
I get them the
it's
TV, or why would I get them
exactly.
this thing that would mellow them down?
Yep, exactly. And and I know that our hiring process screens for a lot of that to make sure you're not just getting some angry dude coming in there to, torture people who are staying inside. But yeah, you want to make sure that, people's perceptions of this group of clients is not so negative that they can't do work to help them rehabilitate, and help us learn more about how these crimes occur and what we can do to be preventative about them in the future.
So I think this is like a good point to kind of switch our conversation, because we're kind of getting up on the end of our show. So other than being a mental health professional, what are
Yeah.
some of the other things that you do, some of the other interests that you have that keeps you healthy, whether it be physically or mentally? Because we know that it's so important as treatment professionals that we need to work on treating ourselves as well.
Yeah. I have been really trying to put myself outdoors more. So I live in northern Minnesota. Winter is not always the best time to do that.
Hey, you're
But
speaking to Canadian here, so I
oh,
understand that
that's true. That's
completely.
right. I don't have anything to say. That's true. Um, uh, but like I have gotten really big into fly fishing over the past like 10 years or
Ooh.
so. I find it unbelievably meditative. It's just enough work where you keep physically engaged with what you're doing, right? You're casting the line, you're stripping out the line, you're tying on new flies, and it's kind of an active. It's not just bobber fishing, and I find that extraordinarily meditative. I tie my own flies. You know, if you've ever watched the show Hannibal, he ties flies and stuff like that for salmon fishing. I really enjoy that. I've been rock climbing, just getting my body active. And then probably, I think the most important part of my, and frankly, anyone's mental health regimen should be playing Stardew Valley, which is one of my favorite games
Yeah, it
of
is.
I actually
all time.
recommended Stardew to a client last night.
I know
Oh
we're not supposed to make pitches for mental health treatments or anything, but Stardew Valley,
no,
just,
Stardew Valley.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I have to get back. I love the
You and
game.
Amanda need to do another stream of
We have
Stardew.
to do. Yeah, me and Amanda desperately need to get back into it actually together, because it was such a great game. It's a great game to play solo. I actually had a lot more fun actually playing with my wife because
Yes,
of
yeah.
just the chaos that can ensue.
I
No,
completely
it's a
agree with
great game.
that. I completely agree with that. I just started playing co-op with my wife, and so now we just went into the mines for the first time, and that was raw chaos, and it was so much fun. But yeah, like when you're talking about like mental health, what do I do to unwind? Stardew Valley. I love Stardew
Hmm.
Valley. A game, weirdly enough, when I think about a game that I want to sit back and chill with, I love Grand Theft Auto Online.
Hmm.
You just get in a car, you get in a plane, you cruise, and you just
You do whatever.
Yeah, you
you
just
do
do. Yeah.
whatever. That's exactly right. And I find a joy and a freedom in that kind of gaming experience. When we talk about the possibilities, not to get too much into the clinical, but like open world games and what they are capable of bringing to the
Oh.
discussion is a whole discussion in and of itself.
Yeah, there's this
But
whole dynamic of how do you play an open world game?
exactly.
Right.
The
Exactly.
perfectionist and completionist in me is I need to clear the map. I need to get everything. And I need to remove every little dot on that map. And I will not be satisfied until it is done.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Aside from that, I've been reading a book that came out. I guess it's I think, what is it called? An omnibus. And it
Hmm.
is the Star Wars Darth Vader by Charles Soule. Um,
Ooh.
and I got that the day it came out. It is a hardcover, full color. God only knows how many pages. It's like a couple hundred pages, isn't it? Yeah, 624 pages, all color, and it's the entire run of the Charles Soule Darth Vader comic series, which is probably just the best Star Wars comics ever made.
Fantastic.
It's just unbelievable. So connecting with those characters and my hype level for the upcoming Obi-Wan show, I mean, my hype level has the high ground. I'm going to be honest with you. It's all over. Uh, don't try to talk me down. Don't even try it.
Oh, I
It's
am so in for that show. I've been waiting for it for years.
same. This show, and then we know almost nothing about it, but the Acolyte. When the Acolyte comes out, something about a dark side character getting the main story. is just chef's kiss good to me. I think evil characters have just as much as good characters to teach people too.
Yeah,
So I
the
like it
evil
when
characters
bad
have
is.
dynamics and freedom that we can utilize and leverage.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's like, think about how much work they had to do to make Captain America a super interesting character. He's a goody goody. But then Darth Maul shows up for 1 second and immediately you know that guy's interesting. I love this guy more than I love my parents. You know,
And then you watch
just
Clone Wars, and he just gets
oh,
more and more interesting.
He
Clone
just gets
Wars and
more
then
right.
Rebels. Yeah.
It's
And
amazing.
I wouldn't be doing myself a favor if I didn't also shout out Avatar: The Last Airbender and
Oh,
Legend of Korra.
so good.
Of two of the greatest animated shows I've ever seen.
So you're
I
talking to
need
someone
to
that
watch it.
is wearing Avatar Aang socks right now.
Oh, for real?
Yeah.
I have never watched it, unfortunately,
Oh,
and
Matt, you
it
gotta get
is on
on
my
that.
list, and I will. I will, because I see so many like little videos. I see so many things about the show that
It
I need to watch it.
Yeah, because I've been using Avatar more in therapy lately, and I think I've used it with like 3 or 4 clients, and it just hit on another level with
yes.
them. One of my clients that has ADHD, Tourette's, and a whole bunch of other dynamics really resonated with Aang, and he's still in the first season, but really resonated with the character, and had his mom watch the show with him to help the mom understand his own internal dynamic.
Oh, I love that. That's so good. That's
That's
so good.
great.
And then even The Legend of Korra, the
Mhm.
follow-up TV show, is spectacular, genuinely spectacular, addressing some of those issues for older teens. You know, your first relationships, grief and loss, like proper trauma and stuff like that. And then you find your own people to kind of be inspired by in these shows. Like Tenzin
Oh,
is
Tenzin is so good.
he's just one of my absolute favorite characters and just such a good example. I consider him a great example of healthy masculinity,
Hmm.
as his character grows throughout the show as well. But yeah, so I know that was a lot to talk about what I'm kind of into and what I'm
Hmm.
looking forward to. But uh, yeah, that's what's on my plate right now. Really excited. A lot of good stuff coming up in the next couple days.
Yeah. And to kind of close us off, the last question I had is, I know you've done a lot of trainings, like I said, on Marvel characters with Geek Therapeutics. What are some of the things that you are currently working on, or that you're planning on working on in the future?
Well, nothing is set in stone yet, but there was a really, really positive reaction, and continues to be a really positive reaction to some of those Marvel trainings. And there have been talks about maybe getting that written down somewhere in uh, more of an instructive, educational setting, kind of like a book or something.
Hmm.
I don't know. It's
I'd
such a
buy it.
big thing. Oh, that is shocking.
Absolutely.
I already have pre-orders, and I don't even have a title. Unbelievable. But like it really is. It's just like this next step that feels so big and so impossible, but it feels also like the next logical thing because I loved those geek therapy things. They made me appreciate the MCU more. It made me appreciate the power of stories. It made me appreciate the work that goes into representation of certain types of characters. So yeah, I'll definitely keep you guys updated on anything that's coming out. Nothing in the immediate future, but I am not done with my work in this realm by a long shot.
Well, we can't wait to hear more from you. And like I said, for the people that may not have watched some of the trainings, if you are interested in geek therapy, I highly recommend you looking into at least doing like the cultural competency for geek therapeutics, and watching some of Matt's videos, because they are really, really good.
I really appreciate that. Thank you.
So I know, Matt, you are the person that does our closing and the plugs. But Matt, where can people find you online and some of the best places that they can find you?
Well, other than the fact that it is a toxic cesspool, I am on Twitter. And that is at Matt Fellows 8. It must have been 7 other Matt Fellows that got there first, but I'm willing to take the L on that. So you can find me on Twitter at Matt Fellows 8. You can always shoot me an email at fellows23@gmail.com. No fancy website yet, but that's where you can find me. I love talking with people, especially, frankly, on Twitter. It's been a really positive experience for me so far. So always reach out, and I'd love to have discussions about this sort of stuff with anyone.
Fantastic. That is awesome. And thank you. Thank you for coming on. And everybody, thank you for listening to this and tonight's episode of Healer's Journey. If you can, please leave us a review on iTunes, Podbean, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. It really helps spread the podcast to others who may not know of us, and we want people to know of us. Keep up to date with everything we're doing. Go take a look at our website, guardiansmh.org. Follow us on Twitter at guardiansmh, and join our partner Discord server at discord.gg/guardiansmentalhealth. A couple of really cool things that we're going to be coming up to. June 11th and June 12th, we will be at GCX. We will be in Orlando, Florida, down there, hanging out with everybody. Tickets, I believe, still are available. So go to gcxevent.com, and you'll get to see and hang out with us there. A bit more of a local thing. Anybody who's in the Long Island area of New York, I will be doing and representing Guardians Mental Health over at King's Coast Coffee. They're doing a summer pop-up shop this year. And I will be there August 20th and September 17th. So go check them out, kingscoastcoffee.com. Highly recommend. Our good friend Young Khan has a coffee with them, and we highly recommend that coffee. Outside of that, help us keep the lights on, but more importantly, keep our mental health kits free. Go on over, if you are able to, go and donate over at tiltify.com/@guardiansmentalhealth. If you're not able to donate, that is very much okay. Feel free to share the link to as many people as you can. Last but not least, we do have a new merch store that is up and live. That is at slakermerch.com/collections/guardiansmentalhealth. Go over there to check out some of the really cool merch that we have going on. We now have a blanket, which I found out when I
want as well.
Yeah, I just found that out when I pulled up the link to our store, and I want a blanket. But we have a lot of cool things that are on over there, actually. Really cool. I already put in my order for the Pride t-shirt that we have up there, the blanket. We have a banner, a couple of coffee mugs.
Came out really well.
The Stigma shirt is really nice. So feel free to go over, check that out. If you're looking for some new clothes, we highly recommend Guardians Mental Health clothing. And that is all that I have. That is the end of my plugs. Our plugs, rather.
So, Matt, again, thank you for joining us tonight.
Yes.
And I'm sure we will have many more conversations in the future.
I sure hope so. You guys got a killer podcast here. I love this. This has been such a blast, guys. Feel free to give me a shout anytime, because this was a blast.
Absolutely. This was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
I will try to transition us away. Again, I am new at this, so bear with me.